The station hummed with the steady rhythm of routine. Monitoring Post 7 floated at the edge of Cathoran space, a sentinel watching the border between the Empire and the uncharted systems beyond. Its corridors were polished metal and dim lighting, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. For Commander Taewon Kim, it had become a second home over the past 3 years. A quiet outpost where humans were tolerated, respected even, but never truly trusted. He sat in the observation deck, nursing a cup of synthetic coffee that tasted like burnt nostalgia. Through the viewport, stars stretched in all directions, cold and infinite. 50 years had passed since humanity joined the galactic community. 50 years of diplomacy, trade agreements, and careful navigation through a cosmos that viewed them as clever children playing at the adults' table. The Cthorans were kind enough in their way. They shared technology, opened trade routes, and allowed human liaisons like Taewon to serve aboard their vessels. But there was always a distance, an unspoken understanding that humanity was junior in this arrangement. Taewon didn't mind. He'd learned patience from his grandfather, who'd been among the first humans to shake hands with an alien representative. The galaxy moved slowly. Power was measured in millennia, not generations. Humanity would find its place eventually. The alarm shattered his thoughts. It wasn't the gentle chime of a proximity warning, or the routine pulse of a scheduled scan. This was different, urgent, insistent, the kind of sound that made your heart skip before your brain caught up. Taewon set down his coffee and moved quickly toward the command center, his footsteps echoing against the metal floor. The bridge was chaos. Cthoran officers clustered around holographic displays, their chitinous exoskeletons clicking as they gestured with multiple limbs. Their language was a symphony of clicks and whistles, too fast for Taewon's translator to keep pace. He caught fragments: impossible, malfunction, recalibrate immediately. Sub-Commander Vraxis noticed him first. The Cthoran turned 3 of his 4 eyes toward Taewon, mandibles twitching in what might have been confusion or concern. "Commander Kim, your presence is timely. What's happening?" Taewon moved to the central display, where a 3-dimensional map of nearby space rotated slowly. A single red marker pulsed at the edge of human territory, roughly 14 light-years from their position. "An anomaly," Vraxis said, though his tone suggested he was choosing his words carefully. "Our sensors detected an object entering this sector approximately 6 minutes ago. The readings are unprecedented." Taewon studied the data streaming beside the marker. Mass impossible to calculate accurately. Velocity, 0.8 light speed. Subluminal but absurdly fast for anything traveling through normal space. Energy signature, off the charts. Reading levels that should only exist near stellar cores. No hyperspace wake. No gravitational distortion consistent with known FTL technology. Just raw, impossible speed. Could it be a natural phenomenon? Taewon asked. A rogue planet, maybe? Or some kind of exotic matter? Negative. Another officer, this one with golden markings along her carapace, brought up a magnified view. The object resolved into something that made Taewon's breath catch. It was a ship. Unmistakably artificial, though unlike anything in any database. 53 kilometers long, its hull a seamless surface that seemed to shift and ripple like liquid metal. No visible engines, no heat signature beyond the ambient glow that surrounded it like an aura. Patterns of light moved across its surface. Not reflections, but something intrinsic, as if the ship itself were alive. "There are no identification markers," the golden-marked officer continued. "No response to our hails across all standard frequencies. And most concerning..." She paused, manipulating the display to show a wider view. 11 more markers appeared along the human border, each identical to the first. "We're detecting similar objects at multiple points simultaneously." The bridge went silent. 12 ships, each the size of a small moon, appearing without warning at humanity's doorstep. Taewon felt something cold settle in his stomach. This wasn't human technology. Humanity didn't have anything close to this capability. Their largest vessels were maybe 3 kilometers at most, and even those required weeks of preparation for FTL jumps. This was something else entirely. Could it be an invasion? Someone murmured. A new species? From human space? Vraxis clicked his mandibles in what Taewon recognized as skepticism. Unlikely. We've monitored their territory extensively. There's been no indication of such development. Taewon wanted to agree, but the data didn't lie. These objects had emerged from the direction of Sol, from the heart of human civilization. And yet everything about them screamed impossible. He pulled up the communications log, searching for any recent transmissions from Earth or the outer colonies. Standard diplomatic chatter, trade manifests, scientific reports, nothing unusual. It was as if these ships had materialized from nothing. Then his personal terminal chimed. A private message, encrypted with protocols he hadn't seen since his training days at the Terran Diplomatic Corps. His fingers moved automatically, entering access codes that felt rusty from disuse. The message was brief text only, and it made his blood run cold. Operation Homecoming has been initiated. Stand by for further instructions. TCS Indomitable. TCS, Terran Confederation ship. But there was no Indomitable in the registry. Taiwan had memorized every vessel name in humanity's fleet. It was part of his job. And Homecoming? That word rang bells in the back of his mind. Fragments of overheard conversations from years ago, whispers among senior diplomats about classified projects and contingencies that would never be needed. He looked up at the display, at the massive ships hanging silent in the void, and felt the first tremor of understanding, or perhaps it was fear. The two felt remarkably similar. Commander Kim. Vraxis's voice pulled him back. You're pale. Are you unwell? Taiwan steadied himself. I may have information, but I need to confirm something first. Can you track the trajectory of these objects? Not where they're going, but where they came from. The golden-marked officer worked quickly, overlaying trajectory lines on the galactic map. All 12 ships traced back to a single point of origin, deep within human territory. Not Sul, but somewhere in the outer systems in a region that had been marked as restricted space for decades. A scientific research zone officially, no military installations, no colonies, just research. Taiwan's terminal chimed again. This time it was a live transmission request, marked with the highest priority protocols. His hand hovered over the accept button. Part of him wanted to refuse, to pretend he hadn't seen it, to maintain the comfortable ignorance of the past 3 years. But that wasn't an option anymore. He accepted. The holographic display in the center of the bridge flickered and expanded. Every Ktoran officer turned to watch as the image resolved. It wasn't a video feed in the traditional sense. The quality was too perfect, too three-dimensional, as if the figure standing before them occupied the same physical space, rather than being projected across light years. The man wore a uniform Taiwan didn't recognize. Deep blue, almost black, with silver accents that seemed to move and shift like living things. His face was human, unquestionably so, but there was something about his eyes that made Taiwan's skin prickle. They were too bright, too aware, containing depths that shouldn't exist in organic tissue. His name patch read ADMJ Lee. The man wore a uniform Taiwan didn't recognize. Deep blue, almost black, with silver accents that seemed to move and shift like living things. His face was human, unquestionably so, but there was something about his eyes that made Taiwan's skin prickle. They were too bright, too aware, containing depths that shouldn't exist in organic tissue. His name patch read ADMJ Lee. Monitoring Post 7, the Admiral said, his voice resonating in frequencies that made the station's walls hum. This is Admiral Jinho Lee of the Terran Confederation ship Indomitable. I'm transmitting coordinates for immediate evacuation of all personnel within a 50 light-year radius. You have 6 hours to comply. Vraxis stepped forward, all 4 eyes fixed on the projection. This is Ktoran military space. You have no authority to... Sub-Commander Vraxis. The Admiral's gaze shifted, and Taiwan saw the Ktoran officer physically flinch. I'm aware of jurisdictional boundaries. I'm also aware that in approximately 5 hours and 47 minutes, reality in this sector will undergo significant restructuring. I'd prefer not to have any observers caught in the transition, particularly allies. Restructuring? The golden-marked officer sounded genuinely confused. What are you... The view screen showing external space suddenly went white. Not the white of an explosion or energy surge, but something cleaner, more fundamental, as if the universe itself had been replaced with a blank canvas. Alarms screamed. The station lurched, artificial gravity fluctuating wildly. Taiwan grabbed a support rail, his knuckles white. Through the view screen, something was emerging. It wasn't a ship in any conventional sense. At first it appeared as a pattern, geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Then it began to solidify, reality bending around it like cloth around a fist. The structure was crystalline, vast beyond comprehension. Its surface covered in moving patterns of light that resembled neural pathways more than ship architecture. It was beautiful and terrible and absolutely impossible. The Indomitable had arrived. What? Vraxis couldn't finish the sentence. None of them could. Taiwan understood the feeling. His mind was trying to process what he was seeing, to fit it into categories and definitions, but it kept sliding away like oil on water. Admiral Lee's projection hadn't moved. As I was saying, you have 6 hours. I suggest you use them wisely. The Genesis Project is about to show the galaxy what humanity has become, and I promise you, Sub-Commander, you want to be far away when that happens. The transmission ended. The bridge remained silent, every officer staring at the impossible vessel hanging in space before them. It was growing, Taiwan realized. Not moving, not deploying, growing like something alive. Tendrils of crystalline material extended outward, weaving patterns that looked suspiciously like ship formations. Except there were no ships, just extensions, pieces of a larger whole. His terminal chimed once more. A new message, this one from Admiral Lee directly. Commander Kim, your grandfather would be proud. Welcome home. Taiwan read the words 3 times before their meaning sank in. His grandfather, who'd made first contact, who'd spent his entire life building bridges between humanity and the stars, who'd disappeared 20 years ago on a research expedition to the outer systems. His ship lost with all hands. No bodies recovered. The restricted research zone. The Genesis Project. Operation Homecoming, oh God, Commander? Vraxis's voice was small, uncertain in a way Taiwan had never heard from a Cathoran officer. What are they? Taiwan looked at the Indomitable, at the patterns of light dancing across its surface, at the way space itself seemed to bend in its presence. He thought about his grandfather, about the secrets humanity had kept, about the 50 years of careful diplomacy that now felt like a calculated misdirection. They're us, he said quietly, or what we've become, and I don't think the galaxy is ready for that truth. The evacuation order spread through Cathoran Command like wildfire. Within an hour, every military installation within 50 light-years had received the same message, the same impossible deadline. Most responded with confusion, some with outrage, a few with immediate compliance. Those who'd seen the sensor readings of the Indomitable didn't question. They simply left. Monitoring Post 7 was one of the last to depart. Vraxis insisted on maintaining his position until the final moments, partly from professional pride, partly from genuine curiosity. Taiwan couldn't blame him. He was just as curious, just as terrified of looking away from the view screen where the impossible ship continued its slow, inevitable transformation. It had been 3 hours since Admiral Lee's transmission. In that time, the Indomitable had grown to encompass an area larger than most space stations. But calling it a ship felt inadequate now. It was a structure, a construct, something that blurred the line between vessel and architecture, between machine and organism. Sections of its crystalline hull periodically became translucent, revealing internal spaces that defied geometry, corridors that looped in on themselves, chambers that seemed to contain more volume than their external dimensions should allow. And everywhere, that pulsing light like neural pathways firing in perfect synchronization. We're receiving telemetry from the other 11 objects, the golden-marked officer reported. Her voice had lost its earlier certainty, replaced by the careful neutrality of someone trying not to panic. They're exhibiting identical growth patterns and... She paused, manipulating her console. They're communicating. With each other. Not through radio or quantum entanglement, but something else. We're detecting fluctuations in background spacetime itself, as if they're using reality as a transmission medium. Taiwan moved closer to her station, studying the data streams. She was right. The ships, if that's what they still were, had established a network, a web of connections spanning dozens of light-years instantaneously. No lightspeed lag, no signal degradation, just perfect immediate communication across distances that should have made such coordination impossible. They're not ships, he said aloud, the realization crystallizing even as he spoke. They're nodes, parts of a larger system. A system doing what? Vraxis demanded. Commander Kim, your people owe us an explanation. This is beyond any treaty agreement, beyond any... His words cut off as every console on the bridge lit up simultaneously. Not an alarm this time, but something more fundamental. The station's AI was receiving a transmission, not through communications arrays, but directly into its core systems. Firewalls collapsed like paper, security protocols evaporated, and then suddenly every screen displayed the same image. It was a woman. Human, clearly, though like Admiral Lee, there was something in her eyes that suggested depths of experience no human lifespan should contain. She wore the same deep blue uniform, her hair pulled back in a practical bun, and when she smiled, it held equal parts warmth and profound sadness. "Greetings to our Cathoran friends," she said, her voice carrying that same resonant quality that made the station's walls hum. "My name is Dr. Mira Song, Chief Xenobiologist of the Genesis Project. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but subtlety was never our strongest suit." She paused, and her smile faded into something more serious. "You deserve an explanation. The galaxy deserves an explanation. So let me tell you a story about humanity, about ambition, and about the price we paid to become something more." The image shifted, and suddenly, they weren't looking at Dr. Song anymore. They were looking at Earth, beautiful blue hanging in the void like a jewel. But the perspective was wrong. They were seeing it from somewhere beyond the moon, watching as decades compressed into seconds. 50 years ago, Dr. Song's voice continued over the imagery. Humanity took its first steps into galactic society. We were welcomed cautiously by civilizations thousands of years older than ours. We learned your languages, adopted your customs, and tried desperately to prove we belonged among the stars. The view pulled back further, showing the gradual expansion of human presence. Colonies on Mars, mining operations in the asteroid belt, research stations among Jupiter's moons. But we also learned something else. We learned our limits. Your faster-than-light drives were biological, grown over millennia of evolution or engineering. Your ships were extensions of your species' fundamental nature. And we had nothing comparable. Our best vessels were clumsy, inefficient, barely capable of crossing the void between stars. We would always be junior partners, always dependent on others for the technology that made interstellar civilization possible. The imagery shifted again, diving into one of Jupiter's moons, Europa. The ice cracked open like an egg, revealing hidden facilities deep beneath the frozen surface. Laboratories, research chambers, and something else, something organic yet artificial, growing in massive tanks like the larval stage of an impossible creature. "Some of us couldn't accept that," Dr. Song said quietly. "Some of us believed humanity deserved more than second-class citizenship in a galaxy we'd only just discovered. So we started the Genesis Project, a collaboration between our brightest minds, biologists, physicists, philosophers, and artists. Our goal was simple to state, impossible to achieve. Create a synthesis between biological life and physical law, not just machines that mimicked life, but vessels that were alive in every meaningful sense. Ships that could think, grow, adapt, and evolve." Taewon felt his chest tighten. His grandfather had been a physicist, one of the best of his generation. He'd also been obsessed with the problem of FTL travel, spending years trying to develop alternatives to the biological drives other species used, and then he'd disappeared, vanished into the outer systems on a research expedition that everyone assumed had ended in tragedy. Except he hadn't died. He'd simply left, joining something so far beyond conventional understanding that coming back would have been meaningless. The imagery showed the first successful test, a small vessel, barely 10 meters long, emerging from Europa's hidden facilities. But it wasn't moving through normal space. It was folding reality around itself, compressing distance like an origami trick. One moment it orbited Europa, the next it appeared near Titan, having crossed hundreds of millions of kilometers instantaneously. "We succeeded," Dr. Song said, and now there was pride in her voice mixed with that ever-present sadness. But success came with a cost. To create truly living ships, we needed living crews, pilots who could interface directly with the vessel's consciousness, becoming part of the ship rather than simply commanding it. We needed individuals willing to transcend biological limitations, to merge their neural patterns with the ship's architecture, until the distinction between pilot and vessel became meaningless. The view shifted to interior spaces, medical bays, neural integration chambers, and finally the pilots themselves, humans but changed. Their skin bore patterns similar to the ship's crystalline structure. Their eyes held that same impossible depth. And when they spoke, their voices harmonized in ways that suggested they were communicating across multiple layers of reality simultaneously. We called them the Ascended, Dr. Song continued. Volunteers who chose to become something more than human, something less than machine. They pilot our vessels not by controlling them but by being them. Every thought, every decision, every movement is a collaboration between human consciousness and living ship intelligence. On screen, the Ascended entered their vessels, or were absorbed by them. The distinction wasn't clear. The small test ship began to grow, sections of its hull unfolding like a flower blooming. And then it jumped, not through hyperspace but by simply deciding to exist somewhere else, reality obligingly reorganizing itself to accommodate that decision. For 20 years we worked in secret, Dr. Song said, growing our fleet, training our Ascended, and solving the countless problems that arose from creating life where none should exist. We kept our project hidden because we knew the galaxy wasn't ready. We knew that what we were doing would be seen as dangerous, as heretical, as a violation of natural order. The imagery accelerated, showing the construction of larger vessels. 10 meters became 100. 100 became a kilometer. Kilometers became the massive structures now hanging in space. Each one was unique, yet part of a greater whole. Individual consciousnesses networked into a collective intelligence that spanned the void. And we were right. Dr. Song's image reappeared, her expression grave. The galaxy isn't ready, but ready or not, we've reached the point where secrecy is no longer possible. Operation Homecoming was always the inevitable conclusion of our work, the moment when we would reveal ourselves and accept whatever consequences followed. She looked directly at the camera, and Taewon felt as if she were staring into his soul. So here we are. Humanity has evolved beyond the limitations that kept us dependent on others. We've created vessels that exist at the intersection of biology and physics, consciousness and matter. We've proven that intelligence can transcend its original form, that life can be designed and directed rather than simply accepted as given. The view pulled back to show the Indomitable in its full glory, now easily 100 kilometers across and still growing. Its surface was a tapestry of light and shadow, patterns that suggested complex computations occurring at scales beyond human comprehension. And somewhere within that vast structure, Taewon knew, were the Ascended pilots, his grandfather perhaps among them. Their minds merged with the ship's consciousness, experiencing reality in ways that would drive an unmodified human insane. We're not here to conquer, Dr. Song said firmly. We're not here to impose our will or demand recognition. We're here because this is our galaxy too, and we refuse to be perpetual children in someone else's civilization. The Genesis ships are coming home, returning to the worlds humanity calls its own. And yes, we're bringing changes that will reshape everything. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost regretful. I know this is frightening. I know our very existence challenges fundamental assumptions about what's possible, what's natural, what's right. But consider this. Every species in the galaxy reached for the stars using abilities that evolved over millions of years. They had time, had the luxury of gradual development. Humanity didn't have that luxury. We're newcomers, forced to adapt or accept permanent inferiority. So we chose a third option. We chose to evolve deliberately, to design our own transcendence rather than waiting for nature to provide it. The transmission began to fade, Dr. Song's image becoming translucent. The evacuation window closes in 2 hours. After that, we begin the next phase, establishing resonance fields that will allow our ships to exist more fully in this reality. The process is safe for observers at a distance but uncomfortable up close. I recommend you take Admiral Lee's advice seriously. Her final words echoed through the bridge. Humanity has come home, and the galaxy will never be the same. The screens went dark. The bridge remained silent, every officer processing what they'd just witnessed. Taewon felt numb, his mind struggling to accommodate this new reality. Everything he thought he knew about humanity's place in the galaxy had just been revealed as careful fiction, a performance maintained while something vastly more significant unfolded in secret. Commander Kim. Vraxis's voice was very quiet. Did you know? No, Taewon said honestly. I suspected there were classified projects, things I wasn't cleared for. But this... He gestured helplessly at the view screen where the Indomitable continued its impossible growth. "This is beyond anything I imagined." "Your species has created gods," the golden-marked officer said, and there was no accusation in her voice, only wonder mixed with fear. "Living gods that can reshape reality itself." "Not gods," Taiwan corrected gently. "Just humans who chose to become something more, the same way your ancestors became spacefaring, or the way any species evolves beyond its origin. We just took a different path." Vraxis made a clicking sound that Taiwan had learned meant deep thought. "A path that leads where? Commander, these ships of yours, they're networked, growing, communicating in ways we can't even monitor. What happens when they finish whatever they're building? What happens when this resonance field is established?" Taiwan had no answer. He looked at the chronometer. 1 hour and 43 minutes until the deadline. Outside, the Indomitable had begun emitting pulses of light that seemed to pass through the station, rather than around it, as if solid matter was merely a suggestion it chose to acknowledge. His terminal chimed one final time. Another message from Admiral Lee, brief and to the point. "Evacuation transport is on approach. You're welcome to observe the transition from a safe distance, or you can come aboard. Your grandfather would like to see you. Choice is yours." J.L. Taiwan stared at those words. "Your grandfather would like to see you." 20 years, 2 decades of believing he was dead, of mourning his loss, of wondering what final thoughts had crossed his mind when his ship failed, and the void claimed him, except he hadn't died. He'd transcended, become part of something so vast and strange that returning would have been impossible. Until now. "Sub-Commander," Taiwan said slowly, "I need to go aboard that ship." Vraxis turned all 4 eyes toward him. "That would be inadvisable. We don't know what conditions exist inside such a vessel. The environment alone could be hostile." Taiwan smiled without humor. "Maybe, but they're offering, and I need to understand. Not as a diplomat or a liaison, but as someone whose family is part of this. I need to see what they've become." The Cathoran was silent for a long moment. Then he clicked his mandibles in what might have been approval or resignation. "Very well. But, Commander Kim, if you learn something that threatens galactic stability, I expect you to report it, regardless of personal connections." "I will," Taiwan promised, knowing he probably wouldn't. How could he report something when he didn't even understand it yet? The evacuation transport was a small craft, sleek and efficient in the way Cathoran designs always were. It docked with monitoring post 7 long enough for Taiwan to board, then detached and began moving toward the Indomitable. As they approached, Taiwan watched the massive vessel fill the view screen, its surface a living kaleidoscope of light and shadow. A section of the hull opened, or perhaps it was more accurate to say it became permeable, the crystalline structure rearranging itself to allow passage. The transport slipped inside, and suddenly they were in a space that shouldn't exist. The interior was vast beyond the ship's external dimensions, filled with structures that hurt to look at directly. Corridors twisted in impossible directions. Chambers contained geometries that made his eyes water. And everywhere that pulsing light like a heartbeat, like neural activity, like thoughts made visible. The transport docked at a platform that seemed to materialize specifically for that purpose. The airlock cycled. Taiwan stepped out into the Indomitable, into humanity's future, and felt the deck beneath his feet pulse in greeting.